Okay, and welcome back, students taking the Math for Business and Finance and Math Applications. Chapter 12, Word Problems, the odd-numbered problems, and we had stopped on problem 21, so let me get down to 23. And again, this is just repetitive. You know, you do enough of these, it's almost like working clockwork, but don't do them mindlessly because you know, your repetition is the mother of learning, and you should be able to just, you know, work these out real quick without having to look back in the textbook when you're doing, you know, your exams or your proctored exam. Okay, so 12-23, let me get my pen here. Tony Ring wants to attend Northeast College. He will need $60,000 4 years from today. Okay, so he will need $60,000. So that's a future, right, value 4 years from today. So 4 years is the time, and we're going to wonder how much the present value is today. Assume Tony's bank pays 12% interest compounded semi-annually. Remember, that's twice a year. What must Tony deposit today so he will have $60,000 in 4 years? Okay, so if I draw the timeline real quick, it's saying he needs $60,000 in the future, right? We don't know how much is the present value. Okay. And this here is over 4 years, and it's at 12% interest, compounded semi-annually. Okay, so 4 years compounded semi-annually, so we might multiply that by 2, we get 8 periods, and if it's at 12%, we divide that by 2, and we get 6%. Now, this 60,000 is a future value. We need to know the present value. So when I jump up, I want to make sure I'm on the present value table, and I also want to make sure, you know, to know that I'm on the right table. Remember that my factor is going to be, you know, my factor is going to be less than 1 point something, okay? Because it's a present value. A future value, right, is going to be greater than 1 point something, right? So jump up to the present value table, right? And I was at 6%. So look under the 6% column for 8 periods, and I have a factor of 0.6274. Okay. So my factor is 0.6274. So I take the 0.6274 and I multiply it times the 60,000, and I end up with $37,644. Okay, that's my present value, which makes sense because it's less than the future value of 60,000. Okay, so he needs to deposit that 37,644 in his account. 12-25. Pierre wants to buy a used Jeep in 5 years. He estimates the Jeep will cost $15,000, so that's a future value in 5 years. Assume Pete invests $10,000 now, so that's a present value, at 12% interest compounded semi-annually. Will Pete have enough money to buy his Jeep at the end of 5 years? Okay, and this is a pretty good example of, you know, word problems. Remember, we have, when you're working a word problem, we have direct information, you know, information that's directly related to solving the problem. We have information that has nothing to do with solving the problem, and we have information that needs to be modified. Okay, so when you're first reading this, don't get thrown off. I mean, think about this. You know, it's saying, you know, my time frame is 5 years, and yeah, even though I'm being given $15,000 as a future value, I'm not going to be using the $15,000 as a future value, except to compare it to whatever I figure out what the future value should be. Okay, so you know, it's compounded semi-annually, so I have a time frame of 5 years, so that's 5 times 2 gives me 10 periods. Okay, and at 12% interest, I'm dividing by 2, that's 5% interest. Okay, so when I jump up and look at the future value table, let me erase all of that. So when I look at the table here, I should be looking under the 5% column for 10 periods, which gives me a factor of 1.62. Oops, let me just get this right. Oh, wrong. It's not 5%, it's 6%. Duh. Okay. 1.7908. Okay, that's the factor. So my factor is equal to 1.7908. Okay, and I multiply that 1.7908 by the 10,000, and I end up with $17,908. Okay, and like I said, you know, if he invests it that way, that's greater than the 15,000. So yes, the answer to that question, does he have enough money, right, is yes, right, because he only needs 15,000 in the future. Right, let's see here, 27. Paul Havlik promised his grandson Jamie that he would give him $6,000 8 years from today for graduating from high school. Right. Future value, time frame. Assume money is worth 6% interest, the rate compounded semi-annually. What is the present value of the 6,000? Right. So 8 years times compounded semi-annually, which is 16 periods. At 6% interest, that's divided by 2, gives us 3% per period. So I'm going to look at the table, and without doing that, I know that the factor is 0.6232. Maybe I should do that, okay? Because remember, I'm looking at the present value table, not the future value table. So I'm looking at 3% at 16 periods, and that's how I get my 0.6232. Okay, so all I need to do is then take the 0.6232 and multiply it by the $6,000. Now notice that I'm doing it this way, all right? I could have went and said 6,000 times 0.6232, but if I do the math by hand doing this, then I end up with, you know, a lot of extra math. It's just easier to, since multiplying, it doesn't matter which order you're doing it in. If I multiply the 0.6232 by the 6,000, I can just bring down my zeros and then do the math across here, and I end up with $3,739.20. Okay, so that's the present value of the 6,000. Or if you use the calculator, you don't have to mess around with any of that at all. Okay. All right. Last problem, 12-29. Jackie Rich would like to buy a $19,000 hybrid car in 4 years. Future value, time frame. Jackie wants to put money aside now. Present value. Jackie's bank offers 8% interest rate, compounded semi-annually. That's times 2, twice a year. How much must Jackie invest today? Remember, that's the present value. Okay, so again, step by step. 4 years times 2 is 8 periods. 8% divided by 2 is 4% interest. And I want to know what the present value is, so I go to the present value table. And in the present value table, I had I had 4% interest right here, and that was for 8 periods. So my factor is 0.7307. So my factor is 0.7307, and I'm only writing this factor down just for your benefit. Okay, I would just immediately go and just write it over here, 7307, and then I'm multiplying it by the 19,000. Okay, and if I did it by hand or I'm doing it by a calculator, I end up with 13,883.30 as the present value of that 19,000, and that makes sense. It's lower than the 19,000 because it's the present value. Okay, that's it for the word problems. So I will see you all in the summary practice test.